The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like a blanket pressing down on the chest. The hum of the ship's engines was steady, soft, and endless. It was the only sound that kept him company in the long hours of the night. He sat, alone, leaning forward on the small metal chair, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the wide window that opened to the stars. Beyond the glass, space stretched forever, dark and endless, dotted with countless lights. Each light was a sun, a world, maybe even a home to someone out there. But to him, they were only reminders of distance, how far away Earth was, how far away normal life had slipped from his hands. His name was Daniel, though most people just called him Danny on the ship. But at that moment, alone in the stillness, he did not feel like Danny the soldier or Danny the survivor. He felt small. He felt tired. His mind replayed the screams of battle, the sharp crack of gunfire, the way the metal halls of the station had burned and collapsed. Even now he could still see faces, faces of people who had fought beside him, faces he would never see again. The silence of the room was not peace. It was the echo of everything he had lost. And then, the door slid open. It was not loud, but, in the silence, it felt like a roar. He turned his head quickly, his body stiffening out of instinct, hand moving halfway to the sidearm that sat on the desk. But when he saw her, his arm froze, then fell back into his lap. She entered without a sound. Tall, graceful, strong. She filled the frame of the doorway like she had always belonged there. The dim light touched her in ways that made her seem both near and far, human yet not. Her eyes glowed faintly with their otherworldly light, a soft shimmer of silver blue, a color no human eyes had ever held. Her movements were deliberate, every step carrying weight, as if each one was a choice she made carefully. And yet, when she looked at him, her gaze was unshaking, like she was staring straight into the heart he was trying to keep hidden. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Daniel felt his breath catch in his throat. He had fought beside her. He had seen her strength, seen her tear enemies apart with her bare hands, seen her stand tall where others had fallen. But here, in the silence, it wasn't her power that struck him. It was the quiet in her eyes, a quiet that mirrored his own. There was a heaviness between them, the kind of heaviness that came only after shared battles. Words felt too small, too weak, too empty to carry what lay inside both of them. And so she stood there, silent, her gaze locked onto him. For a moment he wondered if he was dreaming. For a moment he almost wished he was, because in dreams, things did not have to end. She took one step forward. The sound of her boot on the floor was soft, but to him, it echoed like a drumbeat in his chest. She moved closer, not fast, not slow, but with purpose. She was not rushing him, not demanding anything. She was just there, walking the space that separated them. And Daniel. He couldn't look away. His chest tightened with every step she took. His heart pounding, his mind racing with questions he didn't dare ask. Why was she here? Why now? What did she want from him? But deep inside, a part of him already knew the answer. It wasn't duty. It wasn't orders. It wasn't even the war. It was something else. Something wordless. Something raw. By the time she stopped, she was standing close enough that he could feel her presence like heat. Close enough that he could hear the steady rhythm of her breath. Close enough that the silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt alive. Daniel swallowed hard. His voice, if he tried to use it, would have broken. But she didn't give him the chance. She didn't speak. She didn't ask. She just looked at him with that silent, piercing stare, as if telling him something he had never allowed himself to believe. That he mattered, that he wasn't alone, that he belonged to her, here and now, even in the middle of endless war. And for the first time that night, Daniel let the silence stay. He let it speak for both of them. The room still held its quiet, but now the silence felt different. It was heavier, weighted with memory and fear. Daniel's gaze kept flicking toward her, to the way she stood there, strong and calm, as if she could hold the universe on her shoulders without flinching. And yet, he could see it in her eyes. The shadows of the battles they had faced together, the losses, the pain she had carried silently while fighting alongside humans who were slower, weaker, more fragile. She was not human, not fully. Her people were bred for war, for strength, for endurance beyond what a human body could survive. Her limbs were longer, her reflexes faster, her senses sharper. In any ordinary fight, she would have been unstoppable. But here, in the quiet of a room after a devastating battle, she seemed almost small, fragile, in a way that was hidden from the world but revealed to him in this private moment. Daniel remembered the last mission vividly. The ambush in the asteroid field, the screams, the fire, the way metal groaned as the station shook and twisted. He remembered watching a friend fall, knowing there was nothing he could do, feeling the helplessness crush him like a weight he could never lift. And through it all, she had been there, moving, fighting, saving lives with precision and grace. But even she had not been untouched. He had seen her pause, eyes glimmering when a human teammate had been injured. A flicker of worry, fear, grief. Emotions she was not supposed to feel so openly. Now, standing so close, Daniel realized just how much they had in common. They were both survivors, both scarred, both fighting not just enemies, but the constant weight of life in a universe that seemed determined to break them. He wanted to speak, to say something that could bridge the gap between them, but the words stuck in his throat. How could he explain the swirl of fear, longing, and exhaustion that had been building inside him for weeks? How could he tell her that he wasn't afraid of the war itself, but of losing her in it? Every battle they fought, every mission, could be the last. And yet he could not stop thinking about her, could not stop feeling that pull toward her, the warmth in a galaxy that was otherwise cold and merciless. She noticed his hesitation, and her hand moved slightly. Not to touch him, but close enough that he could sense the energy in her presence. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, then closed again. Silence was their shared language tonight, and in it, Daniel felt more understood than he had in months. They didn't need words. Everything had been said already in battles, in shared pain, in stolen glances across smoke-filled corridors. Her eyes softened for a moment, and he saw a vulnerability there that she would never show to anyone else. And for a fleeting instant he wished he could hold her, reassure her, protect her, even though he was painfully aware that no human could truly shield her from the dangers of this universe. And yet, he wanted to try. He wanted to be enough, even if he wasn't as fast, as strong, or as invincible as she was. The quiet stretched, and Daniel could hear the subtle rhythm of her breathing, the faint hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the floor. Time seemed to slow. In that moment, the war, the chaos, the destruction, they all faded into the background. All that existed was the shared space between them, the unspoken connection that had been forged in blood and fire, in victories and losses, in moments when life had hung by a thread. She finally stepped closer, just enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her. Her eyes locked on his, steady, unwavering, and Daniel felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. The fear, the exhaustion, the grief, all of it was still there, but somehow it felt lighter. Somehow, knowing she was there, that she had come, to him without a word, made it bearable. He realized something in that instant. She was not just a warrior. She was not just a survivor. She was a reminder of what it meant to fight for something beyond oneself. She carried hope, even in the darkest moments. And he had been so focused on survival, on getting through the next mission, that he had almost forgotten that hope existed at all. Daniel let his hand rest on the edge of the table, close to hers, but not touching. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply looked at her, and in that look, he tried to convey everything he felt: the fear, the longing, the gratitude, the unspoken love. She understood. He knew she understood. and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe. Not fully, not completely, but enough to feel that maybe, just maybe, they could face the universe together. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing louder than the hum of the ship's engines. She had stopped just a few feet away, but the distance between them felt enormous. Not because of space, but because of the weight of everything left unsaid. Every shared battle, every near-death experience, every stolen glance in a smoke-filled corridor. All of it had built a tension neither had acknowledged until now. She took another step forward. Not hurried, not hesitant, but with deliberate care. Her boots made almost no sound on the metal floor, yet to Daniel, each step resonated like a drumbeat, marking the rhythm of something inevitable. She was closing the distance, yet respecting the space he needed. It was a balance that only someone who understood him so deeply could achieve. Daniel's mind raced. He wanted to speak, to ask why she had come, to demand an explanation, but the words dissolved in his throat. Fear and longing tangled together, leaving him frozen, helplessly aware of the truth he had been trying to ignore. He wanted her closer. He wanted her presence, her touch, her warmth. Not just as a companion in battle, but as something more, something that scared him because it was fragile and human, yet powerful and undeniable. Her gaze never wavered. In her eyes, he saw memories of every fight they had survived together. The late-night patrols through burning corridors, the moments when the station had trembled beneath alien fire, the quiet whispers of the dying. She had been there for all of it, and now, in this quiet room, she was here for him. She stopped again, just close enough that he could feel the faint heat radiating from her body. He could see the subtle tension in her stance, the way her shoulders relaxed and then stiffened, the way her lips parted slightly as if she were about to speak but decided against it. Daniel understood. She was speaking through her actions, letting silence carry the weight of her intention. The truth hit him harder than any blast he had faced in battle. She wasn't coming to fight. She wasn't coming to argue or demand obedience. She was coming to him, to comfort him, to tell him, without words, that he mattered, that he was not alone, that he had a place in her world, even if their worlds were different. Daniel's hands trembled slightly. He had fought in countless missions, faced enemies whose strength and cunning had almost ended him, and yet he had never felt more vulnerable than he did now. Vulnerable because this was not a fight he could win with skill or strategy. This was a fight of heart and trust, and it terrified him. She tilted her head slightly, observing him with a quiet intensity that made his chest ache. The small movement was enough to break through the wall he had built around himself. Memories of laughter in the mess hall, of quiet jokes during patrols, of her steady hand saving his life, flashed in his mind. All of it had led to this moment, this fragile, perfect instant suspended in time. Then, almost imperceptibly, she raised a hand. Not to touch, not yet, but as if inviting him to meet her halfway. Daniel swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat. He wanted to move, to close the remaining distance, but he hesitated, unsure if this was real or just a projection of his longing. He wanted to believe it was real, but fear had kept him cautious, trained by years of survival and loss. Her eyes softened, and something shifted in the room. It was as though her presence filled every corner, every shadow, every empty space left behind by grief and fear. Daniel realized he was no longer thinking about the battles outside, the enemies waiting in the darkness of space. Nothing mattered except this, her, him, and the quiet connection that had grown between them through fire and sorrow. With a courage he did not know he possessed, Daniel leaned forward slightly. It was a small movement, almost imperceptible, but enough. Enough for her to understand that he was ready, that he trusted her, that he wanted her. She smiled faintly, not a full smile, but one that reached her eyes and lit something deep within him. And then she took the final step. The space between them vanished. The tension that had held him captive for so long dissolved in the gravity of her presence. The warmth of her body brushed against his, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt the heavy weight of war lift, replaced by something soft, intimate, and powerful. In that moment, words were useless. Words could never capture the storm of emotions that surged through him. All that mattered was the connection, the closeness, the undeniable truth that had brought her to him, and him to her. The universe could rage outside. Battles could come and go. Death could be waiting at any corner of space. But here, in this small, silent room, they had each other, and that was enough. The room held its breath. Time seemed to slow as they stood close, almost touching, yet suspended in a moment that stretched longer than anything Daniel had experienced in his life. The hum of the ship faded to a whisper, the stars outside the window blurry and distant. There was nothing but the space between them and the unspoken understanding that had grown through shared battles, laughter, and the silent moments of survival. She looked at him, her eyes soft but intense, a mixture of strength and vulnerability that made his chest tighten. Daniel wanted to speak, to ask her why she had come, to express everything he had been feeling for weeks, but the words died in his throat. They weren't needed. Not now. Their eyes had spoken enough. In the depth of her gaze, he felt the pull of something greater than fear, greater than duty, connection, trust, and a fragile, undeniable longing. Then, without warning, she leaned forward. The motion was smooth, deliberate, yet gentle, as if she feared breaking the fragile moment they had built. Her lips met his. At first, it was just a touch, a soft, testing connection, but it carried all the weight of emotion that neither had dared voice. The world seemed to tilt, the stars spinning in slow motion, the hum of the ship fading into nothing. Daniel's body froze for an instant, stunned by the sudden intimacy. It was nothing like he had expected, not a spark, not a thrill, but something deeper, something that resonated in his bones. It was warmth, comfort, and a strange sense of rightness that he hadn't felt in months. Every battle, every loss, every moment of fear melted away into the strength of that kiss. Her lips pressed against his with purpose, not haste, and he felt the subtle pressure of her hands near his shoulders, guiding him closer without force. It was an invitation, a promise, a declaration that needed no words. Daniel responded instinctively, leaning in, allowing himself to be part of the moment. His hands hovered near her arms, unsure whether to touch, afraid he might break the magic, yet desperate to feel her closer. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate, carrying with it every memory of shared victories and shared grief. He could feel her heartbeat, steady but strong, through the warmth of her body pressed against his. In that contact, he understood something profound. She wasn't just a warrior from another world, and he wasn't just a human soldier. Together, they were a force built on trust, on shared pain, on survival, and now on something more intimate, more human, than either of them had expected. When she finally pulled back, her forehead rested against his, and the quiet between them was softer, more comforting than the silence of the room had ever been. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly, his mind struggling to process the intensity of the moment. Her eyes, still fixed on his, glimmered with emotions he couldn't name: relief, longing, vulnerability, and a love that had been unspoken until now. For a moment, they simply stayed like that, forehead to forehead, breath mingling, hearts beating in tandem. The universe could rage outside. The stars could burn and collapse. Death could be waiting in the corridors of the ship. None of it mattered. Right now, there was only this. Only them. Daniel finally found his voice, trembling and raw. I didn't know. He stopped, unable to complete the sentence. Words were pointless. She didn't need them. Her eyes told him what he needed to know. She had come to him. She had chosen him. She had trusted him enough to cross the boundaries they had always kept between their worlds. Her hand brushed gently against his cheek, an almost imperceptible movement, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 promises. Daniel closed his eyes, leaning slightly into her touch, letting himself feel the warmth, the safety, and the undeniable truth of her presence. This was more than desire, more than comfort. It was connection. It was recognition of their shared humanity and their shared strength. The kiss had broken something inside him. Not in a destructive way, but in a freeing way. He realized that fear and pain would always exist, but so would moments like this. Moments of connection, of trust, of love that made the darkness bearable. She had entered his life without a word, had crossed the distance with intent and had kissed him, not for victory, not for power, but simply to remind him that he was not alone. And as they stood there, close and breathing together, Daniel understood, a truth he had almost forgotten. Even in a universe filled with war, suffering, and uncertainty, love, quiet, powerful, and human, could survive. It could endure. It could give them both the strength to face the battles yet to come. In that small, dimly lit room among the stars and silence, the war faded into the background. What remained was raw, real, and unstoppable. The connection between two souls, human and beyond human, united in the simplest yet most profound gesture of all, a kiss. The silence that followed the kiss was heavier than any battle roar. Daniel and she stood there close enough that their breaths mingled, hearts still racing, yet a tension lingered that neither dared break. It was the kind of tension that came not from danger outside, but from the universe pressing in from within. They had crossed a line, one that carried a weight far greater than any enemy they had faced together. Daniel's mind was a storm. He wanted to speak, to explain the rush of emotions that had overwhelmed him, but every word felt inadequate. Fear knotted his stomach. Not fear of war, not fear of dying. He had faced death countless times, but fear of losing her. She had become more than a comrade, more than a protector, more than a constant presence in the chaos of his life. She had become essential. And yet, they were from different worlds, different species, different fates. Every mission, every battle, could be the last time they saw each other alive. Her gaze softened, but there was a shadow there. A shadow he had learned to recognize. The silent conflict within her mind. She was strong, fierce, and unyielding in battle. Yet here, in the quiet of the room, he saw hesitation, a struggle that mirrored his own. Her people were not meant to show vulnerability, not meant to form attachments to weaker beings. And yet, she had crossed that boundary. She had come to him, had kissed him, and had dared to show a piece of herself that no one else could see. Daniel wanted to reach out, to take her hands in his and promise that he would not leave her side, that he would fight for her as fiercely as she had fought for him. But doubt held him back. Was it fair to ask her to care for him when he was human, fragile, and so unworthy compared to her strength? Could she ever truly belong in a world where she didn't fully fit, where danger followed them like a shadow at every turn? The questions clawed at him, gnawing away at the courage he had just found. She shifted slightly, her hand brushing against his arm, tentative, yet deliberate. It was a gesture of reassurance, a silent promise that she was willing to risk everything by being close to him. And that gesture, simple as it was, tore through the walls Daniel had built around himself. The fear didn't vanish, but the longing surged stronger than it had ever been. He wanted her. He needed her. And for the first time he was willing to admit it, not just to her, but to himself. The air in the room grew heavier with unspoken truths. He could feel the pulse of her strength, the rhythm of her heartbeat, and it terrified him. Loving her meant being vulnerable, and vulnerability was something he had never allowed himself to embrace fully. Yet the risk was worth it. Every shared glance, every touch, every breath brought them closer to a bond that defied logic, reason, and even the natural order of their lives. Her lips parted and a soft, almost inaudible whisper escaped. Daniel did not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. She feared losing him, and in that instant, he realized he felt the same fear. Not of the battles outside, not of the enemies that waited in the shadows, but of waking up one day and finding she was gone, taken by circumstances neither could control. That fear was sharper than any blade, heavier than any weapon he had carried. He stepped closer, his hands trembling as he reached for her, hesitant but determined. We can't control the world, he said softly, voice raw with emotion, but we can choose to fight together. If it's only us, let it be us, no matter what comes. Her eyes glistened. She nodded slightly, the tension in her posture easing just a fraction. For the first time, Daniel saw her let go of the battle raging inside her. She was trusting him, giving him a place in her life even when the universe was determined to separate them. And that trust, fragile yet powerful, was worth more than any victory they had ever claimed on the battlefield. They stood in silence again, but it was no longer heavy. It was a silence full of promise, of courage, of understanding. The fear was still there, lingering like a shadow at the edge of the room, but it had been tempered by a force stronger than it, connection. Shared pain had brought them together. Shared strength had kept them alive, and shared love, silent, wordless yet undeniable, was now the bridge between them. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world and yet somehow lighter, knowing that even in the darkness there was someone who would fight beside him, who had chosen him despite all odds. And in that knowledge he found a strength he had never known, the courage to face whatever came next, with her at his side. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he allowed himself to hope. The room felt smaller now, not in a suffocating way, but in a way that made everything outside seem distant and unimportant. The stars beyond the window twinkled faintly, like tiny witnesses to the moment unfolding inside. Daniel and she stood close, the hum of the ship fading into the background, replaced by the rhythm of their shared breaths. Every heartbeat between them seemed louder than the engines, louder than the universe, louder than fear. Daniel looked at her, searching her eyes for a clue, a sign, anything that could guide him. She had always been fearless in battle, unstoppable and precise. But here, in this quiet, she seemed more human than anything he had ever known. Her strength was still there, unmistakable, but now it was paired with a vulnerability that made her glow with a strange warmth, something he had never thought he could feel from someone so otherworldly. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, voice shaking slightly. I mean, I'm human. Fragile. I'm nothing compared to you, and yet... He swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat. I don't want to let you go. Her lips curved into a faint smile, not mocking, not hesitant, but gentle, tender, full of a courage that matched his own. She stepped even, closer, the space between them gone, and rested her forehead against his. It doesn't matter, she whispered softly, her voice a balm to his anxiety. We're not defined by strength or weakness. We're defined by the choice we make. And I choose this, I choose you. Those words hit him with a force more powerful than any weapon. The simplicity, the honesty, the quiet bravery. It made his chest ache. Every mission, every loss, every near-death experience led him here, to this choice, to this moment. And he realized that love, fragile and fleeting as it might be, was worth every risk. He reached for her hands, taking them gently into his. Her skin was warm, stronger than it looked, yet soft enough to comfort him. Their fingers intertwined, naturally, as if they had always been meant to fit together. The connection was electric, not in a shocking way, but in the deep, resonant pulse of two beings who had found each other in the chaos of a universe that refused to be gentle. We'll face everything together, Daniel said, voice firmer now. Every battle, every loss, every moment of fear. As long as we're side by side, we can survive it all. She nodded, eyes glistening, and for the first time, Daniel saw her let go of the burden she had carried for so long. The armor she wore, the unyielding stoicism, melted in his presence. In its place was something more beautiful and more powerful. Trust. Absolute, unwavering trust that they would face the unknown as one, even if the universe tried to tear them apart. They stayed like that, close, hands entwined, foreheads pressed together, and the world outside ceased to exist. The dangers, the battles, the enemies, all of it was distant now. Nothing could touch them in this room. Not because the universe had stopped, but because their choice had given them a shield stronger than any armor, stronger than any weapon. They had chosen each other. Daniel let out a long, steady breath, feeling the tension leave his body in a way he hadn't felt for months. Her presence grounded him, anchored him, and for the first time he allowed himself to hope. Hope that they could survive, hope that they could love, hope that even in a world full of uncertainty, they could find a place together. She leaned in, slightly, resting her cheek against his, and whispered again, "No matter what comes, no matter how dark it gets, we'll face it. Together." Daniel pressed his lips lightly to the top of her head, holding her close. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes. It said, "I see you. I choose you. I will not let you go." And she responded by tightening her hold, resting her hands against his chest, letting him feel the steady beat of her heart, proof that she was real, that she had chosen him too. The choice had been made. It wasn't a dramatic proclamation or a fiery declaration. It was quiet, patient, and unshakable. It was the kind of choice that could survive storms, battles, and the passage of time. It was a promise built not on words, but on presence, on courage, on love. And as they stood there, breathing together in the small room among the stars, Daniel understood something profound. Humanity, fragility, and love were not weaknesses. They were strengths. They gave him the power to stand taller, fight harder, and embrace the universe with someone who mattered more than anything else. In that moment, they were not just two survivors. They were two hearts beating together, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. And that was enough. The alarms in the ship sounded faintly in the distance, a reminder that the universe outside this room was unforgiving. But inside, there was stillness, a fragile bubble of quiet that belonged only to them. Daniel and she stood close, hands intertwined, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync. The battles, the losses, the fear of the unknown, all of it, had not disappeared, but for now it did not matter. They had chosen each other, and that choice was stronger than any enemy, stronger than any storm.